Something changed with Nick Aldis, and WWE never actually announced it. A few weeks ago, he was just the guy who booked your matches. Now people are begging to see him fight Gunther for real, and nobody ever promised them that was happening. So here's the question I can't stop asking. Did fans just decide this on their own, or has WWE been building Nick Aldis into a fighter the whole time and just never told us? Hey, welcome back to WWE Galaxy, I'm Nova. Sometimes WWE turns somebody into a star overnight. Other times it happens so slowly you don't notice it until the crowd's already cheering for someone they barely cared about a month ago. That's what sent me back through everything with Aldis and Gunther. It wasn't one big moment, it was a bunch of small ones stacking up on each other. And today I want to figure out whether Triple H planned this from the start or just noticed what fans were already feeling and decided to run with it. WWE had a dozen boring, safe ways to confirm Gunther versus Aldis and used none of them. A line on the website, a graphic during commentary. Instead, they let it happen live, at a public event in New York, with actual punches thrown in front of a crowd that came for a kickoff show, not a fight. Triple H stood right there and could have shut it down before it started. He didn't. He let it play out in full view of everybody. That's not damage control. That's WWE deciding this was worth being seen. There's one line from Triple H worth pulling out on its own too, the one where he told Gunther he brought this on himself. That's the guy running the entire company publicly refusing to protect his own top star's excuse. Bosses usually stay neutral in moments like that, at least in public. Triple H didn't. He picked a side on camera, and the side he picked wasn't the guy who's actually been winning championships. Now line that up against something people keep skipping past. In every single one of these moments, going back to the very first shove, Aldis has never once thrown the first punch. Not backstage, not on SmackDown, not in New York. Every single time, he's the one answering something that came looking for him. It's not an accident of booking. It's the exact formula wrestling has used forever to turn a guy the crowd merely trusts into a guy the crowd actively wants to see win. Trust doesn't get you cheered. Getting hit first and hitting back does. It's the same reason underdog stories work in every sport, not just this one. The crowd needs to see somebody get wronged before they'll fully get behind them fighting back. Quick break before I keep going. If you're new here, get subscribed. And if you want to see where this actually ends up, dropping a like tells me to keep making these. Okay, back into it. Here's the part that actually makes this risky for WWE, and it's worth slowing down on. Authority figures who step into the ring don't always come out looking bigger. Sometimes they come out looking like exactly what the crowd already suspected, a suit playing dress up for one night. WWE has lived through that before. Vince McMahon wrestling occasionally never made him a threat, it made him a punchline with a bigger paycheck. Even Shane McMahon, who could actually fly around a ring better than people expected, was always treated as a stunt, not a real competitor anyone worried about losing to. That's the exact ditch WWE has to avoid falling into here, and it's not a small risk for a company putting this on one of its two biggest shows of the year. So putting a general manager in against arguably the best wrestler on the roster isn't a safe bet dressed up as a feel-good story. It's WWE betting that Aldis is different, and betting it on one of the two biggest shows of the year. What actually separates him from Vince or Shane is simple. He's not an executive cosplaying as a wrestler for one night. He held a real-world title for over 1,000 days before WWE ever hired him, in a completely different company. He's not learning how to look credible in a ring. He already knows. WWE just hasn't had a reason to show you yet. That gap between what he's actually capable of and what fans assume he's capable of is exactly the kind of thing a company can turn into a moment when it finally lets it show. That bet lines up with something that's been sitting around for over a year now. WWE reportedly discussed this exact idea back in 2025. Aldis in an actual match, with Solo Sikoa across from him instead of Gunther. It got shelved. The appetite existed long before Gunther ever threw a punch. WWE just never had a reason to pull the trigger. What that tells you is this wasn't really Gunther's idea to give Aldis a spotlight. He just handed WWE the excuse they'd apparently been waiting on. Gunther gave them that excuse twice, and this time they didn't shelve it. There's a flip side worth thinking about too, what this does to Gunther if it goes wrong for him. Losing to a general manager who's never had a WWE match doesn't just cost him a win, it undercuts the entire persona he's built as a killer who ends people's careers. That's actual risk sitting on his side of this too, not just Aldis's, and it's part of why this match matters more than a normal authority figure sideshow would, and where they're putting it matters just as much as the fact that it's happening. This isn't a mid-card slot on a random Tuesday. It's SummerSlam, 2 nights, the same show carrying Reigns versus Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship, Punk versus Rhodes for the Undisputed title, and Lesnar against Oba Femi inside Hell in a Cell. You don't spend a spot on a card that's stacked on somebody you're not actually trying to get people to care about. Every other match on that show is there because it sells tickets. WWE is betting Aldis belongs in that same conversation. So think about what actually happens after the bell rings either way. If Aldis wins, WWE has an authority figure who's now also a legitimate threat, somebody who can't just be shoved around behind that desk anymore. If he loses, and loses well, he still walks out as the guy who stood in there with the best wrestler in the company and didn't back down, which might matter more to how fans see him than the actual result. There's basically no version of this that quietly resets him back to being furniture behind a desk. WWE made sure of that the moment they let this happen live instead of behind closed doors. One more thing worth thinking through, and I want to be clear this next part is me guessing, not reporting anything confirmed. How does WWE actually protect both guys here? A clean Gunther win risks making the whole angle feel pointless, like Aldis got his moment and then got put right back in his place. A clean Aldis win risks making Gunther look beatable by a first-timer, which is its own problem for a guy WWE has spent years building as nearly unbeatable. My guess is somewhere messier than either, a competitive match that ends on outside interference or a distraction, something that lets Aldis look like he actually belonged in that ring without costing Gunther his aura going into the fall. So here's what I actually want to know. Does WWE need Aldis to win this match for the babyface turn to stick, or has the turn already happened regardless of what the scoreboard says at SummerSlam? And if he does win, does that make Gunther the guy who created his own worst problem? Let me know where you land in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to see how this actually plays out. Tap that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.